Can you articulate your organization's story? Find out what new research has to say in this episode of Communicate for Impact Live.
Welcome to Communicate for Impact Live, sharing stories, making connections. We're Douglas and Lisa Marie Hatcher, co-founders of Communicate for Impact, a business storytelling training and coaching firm just north of New York City. And our job is to help you create better content faster. And today we are delighted to welcome Jacob Hoehne. Jacob is the founder of a story agency called ISSIMO. Welcome, Jacob. We're so happy to have you today.
Thank you. No, it's an honor to be with you guys.
Jacob is joining us from Utah, which we're jealous. It sounds lovely. Jacob, let's start out with the fact that your company, ISSIMO, has one of the coolest company names ever. Remind us what ISSIMO means and how did y'all come up with it?
Yeah, if you sort of get your Italian hand gestures going and you say ISSIMO, bravissimo, grandissimo, it's you add it to the end of a word to make it the superlative, the most, the best. So if you have a word like bello, which is beautiful, and you add ISSIMO, it's bellissimo, it's the most beautiful. So the idea of it is we take what you have and add ISSIMO and it amplifies what you're doing. So that was the idea. It kind of came from spending some time in northern Italy and falling in love with the culture and the language there. Yeah.
I mean, you can apply it to anything, really.
Yeah.
It's great. Our kids are really into Wordle, and I don't think Wordle has foreign suffixes, but if it did, I think ISSIMO would fit the bill. It's 6 letters.
That's awesome.
Jacob, your professional life has had quite a story arc, making a journey as a marketer and a storyteller from Goldman Sachs to the Vatican. Talk to us about that a little bit. How did that begin?
Yeah, no, it has been an interesting journey. We started in 2006 and mainly focused on video production. And we worked with brands like Google or eBay through their agencies or directly with companies like Panasonic or other global brands. And that was fun and rewarding work. But, in one of the Goldman Sachs project we worked with their, so the 10,000 Small Businesses and 10,000 Women program, we helped translate their curriculum for online distribution. So that involved videos and animations and interactive games and just ways to best communicate those ideas for, particularly they were focusing on women entrepreneurs in rural areas or like sub-Saharan Africa. How could they access this in a mobile way and engage in? And so those were fun ways to help those brands communicate their story. But it was about 5 years ago. We had it was a friend of a friend. We're at a business meeting in San Diego, and this guy that I met was buying and selling power companies in Canada. It had nothing to do with what we were doing, but he's like, I have a friend who's putting on this event at the Vatican, and I think you should really connect. And they after a few meetings, they commissioned us to create an opening film for this event. And so Pope Francis had put out this encyclical called the Laudato Si, the sort of a statement or manifesto about how can we use the free market to help solve the world's problems, particularly the poor and the planet, the two fragilities. And this conference was pulling together people from the World Bank and billionaires and people from the Earth Day Foundation and just different groups of trying to say, how do we come together and solve some of these issues? And they wanted to kick off this event with sort of get everybody on the same page emotionally. And so part of that process was okay, digesting this long document that Pope Francis had issued, and then also trying to how do we communicate this to business leaders and people in a way that inspires them to think differently about maybe how capitalism could work for everyone. And so we created this film called Think a New Thought. It was both well received and also just, it was kind of electrifying for us as a team to both say, like, oh, these are stories that we love to tell. We happen to be pretty good at it, and people want us to make more of these. And so there were groups that came up to us and were like, hey, can we hire you? And point blank, we need to work with you. And we were like, this has never really happened before. We're not going through an RFP and creating bids. And it was just like, and our hearts were just really like into this kind of work. And so we didn't really like build out a business plan or do market research. We just were like, this is our new focus. We're going to dive into this social impact thing, and sort of had a learning curve to figure out, okay, what is this all about? And how do we help those that are for good and for profit or nonprofit, but those that are mission driven and are trying to make the world a better place? How do we help them? And in a way, we sort of see it as sort of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mortals, that we were taking these same skill sets we were using for Google and Goldman Sachs, but now we're applying them for social entrepreneurs and nonprofits and organizations that were trying to do good with that, and helping them amplify their storytelling, and that quickly kind of came around to, often they have needs around fundraising. It's either for a fund or donations and other stuff like that. So it's that pivot was about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's been real rewarding. It's been a fun journey.
Well, it's interesting that you, in your work for Goldman, for example, you were still helping people do well and do good by working with women entrepreneurs and small businesses. So the bridge, it seems to me, was already there. You were just sort of crossing, a bigger chasm, maybe over to the Vatican, but it was sort of in your DNA already.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, we sort of had to cap the number of pro bono projects we did for charities. We said we can do 2, because otherwise we just kept saying yes to all of them, and it's hard to keep the lights on that way. And so we felt like there was this, our heart was in doing these side projects, but we have to do this other stuff to pay the bills. And it's been, like you said, maybe just more of an alignment of like, hey, we can actually focus in on helping this as a business and not just sort of a side charity project. And yeah.
So tell us the building, where did this debut?
Yeah, so it actually played, I'm trying to remember the actual room, but it was at the Vatican. It was something like the Senate of the Cardinals or something like that. It was an auditorium. I mean, it looks like a classroom. It looks like a university classroom. I mean, it's in the heart of Rome. It's a beautiful setting, and I'd been to Rome before, but never to the Vatican. Never sort of behind the public facing, like St. Peter's, and more into the working area of where a lot happens. And it was it was electrifying too, just to see that there were people already sort of in this space trying to shift investment and shift thinking around how can we do good in the world, but also like use the profit motive to help fuel that. And it's not because I think you have to speak to someone's self-interest first. The people tend not to respond contrary to their own self-interest. So a lot of storytelling principle has to do with speaking to, helping them understand why your objective is their objective, and building that bridge of you're there to help them overcome their obstacle, is really at the base of really business storytelling, as you guys well know.
No, it's great.
Jacob, your movie won an award. Let's watch a clip of it.
Here we go. Hold on.
Thinketh, so is he. We've all heard that before. Do we really believe it? Do we really grasp that this world we live in is a byproduct of who we decide we are? As she thinketh in her heart, so is she. There's this notion that we've had stuck in our heads for so long, that the invisible hand of capitalism had to be a selfish hand, a hand without sympathy, that it simply wouldn't work any other way. But what if we were wrong? What if that's not true and never has been?
I have to
Wow.
say that gave me goosebumps.
There's so much to talk about. All right, before I forget, I have to ask you something that I'm sure a lot of people might be thinking. And even if the answer is no, I don't care. Did you get to meet the Pope?
No, we didn't. He was slated to come to
busy?
the event, and I think there were a lot of people excited about that. It was like 10 days before, and ISIS had issued some threat on the Pope's life, and so they sequestered him away for the month of December because they had some threat. So we did have Cardinal Turkson, who's over the dicastery of human development and advancement, and so that was great. But no, didn't get to meet the Pope.
So close.
I love the fact that you bring up Adam Smith. Not to talk about myself, but I'll quickly, when I was a speechwriter at MasterCard and working with the CEO at the time, one of the lines that he used was that Adam Smith's invisible hand must also be a helping hand, which is exactly the sentiment that you guys are talking about.
Yeah, it was an interesting job to our creative director Zach was the real architect on the messaging of this and kind of weaving that together. Interestingly, the first draft was a lot more aggressive and a little bit more combative. And the organizers came back and said, you know what, we sort of need this to have a bit more of like Pope Francis's love and compassion come through. And so we softened it, and it became more of a gentle nudge or an inspiration of like an invitation instead of in your face. And I think that's always part of the process of like in the creative aspect of just trying out different things and then refining and boiling that down. But we did have to weave in, there's some biblical language, for those who have ears to hear that, but also economic language, and these ideas really merge together in a way of like, it's not a religious piece, and it's not just a purely financial piece. And what's been interesting is just what you also notice if you watch the whole thing is it's not a commercial for this event or for a particular firm. It's really more of a banner that anyone can pick up and wave and say, I believe this too. And because of that, it's been picked up, TED.com. So like the TED Talks, they put on these private salons and show inspirational films for these organizations. And they requested to show that at one of their salons. And it was shown at the Impact Summit Europe at the Peace Palace at the Hague, where they have the international tribunals there. There is a group in Stockholm that wanted to show it for an investor conference. It was shown at an event in Monaco. So people, they can sort of see themselves in it, or they can see that this speaks to something that they believe in, and pick up and wave that as well. And I think that's the power of a manifesto as opposed to a commercial.
Sure.
is that you can sort of empower anyone to run with that message. And so we're happy to have that shared as widely and broadly as possible, to get those ideas out and really spark a global conversation. Yeah.
How can people access it? They can go to your website, I take it?
Yeah, so it is on issimo.co, so issimo.co. Also, if you go to Vimeo and just search Think a New Thought, that should show up. Yeah, but it's been surprising just how much it's resonated with very disparate groups, and I think because I think the message is we can choose to do better. We can choose to be compassionate, and that doesn't have to mean that we have to give all that we have to the poor. We can lift them up and do good by doing well, like you've said. So
yeah.
I think there's a lot of space for each of us I believe that it is each of our businesses to do good, and that whether that's employing people and providing a great place to work, or providing a service for the market, and considering all of the stakeholders, not just the shareholders, and it's not just about profit maximization. So it's and I think we see that even in our own self-interest, the long-term financial benefit is, if it's just purely selfish, doing what's good for the community and for the planet is going to be what's going to work out best for business as well.
Well said. And of course, you've got some good friends at the Business Roundtable in DC, which last year put out a statement saying that it's not just about the shareholders, it's about stakeholders, and really trying to broaden the field of the people that you impact and influence as a company.
Yeah.
So talking about doing good, and let's tie that into fundraising.
Yes. You guys did a study recently on the role of storytelling in fundraising, which you just mentioned a few minutes ago. And the research spanned 168 organizations in 34 countries. Jacob, I think we have an idea now, but why this study and why now?
Yeah. I mean, so as we sort of made this pivot towards impact and these social organizations that were trying to do good, a recurring need that came up was, can you help us communicate our value proposition to investors or to donors? We have a virtual gala, or we're trying to raise funds here. We have this investment fund and we need to attract more investors. And we understand how to communicate from one human to another, for one brand to an audience. But there are unique differences with an investor and with what they need to hear and understand. And so part of this was getting some empirical research to say what is the impact of storytelling on fundraising. And we really wanted to arm our partners in that are over marketing and business development in these organizations, to give them to be able to arm them with tools to be able to say, look, when we invest in better storytelling, we make more money, we attract more capital. And so we wanted to see what the data had to say, and we also weren't sure what it would say. We have our anecdotal experience from over 15 years of working with brands, but another factor of this was just with the COVID pandemic, and everything changed for every business. And what were the new rules? What was working? And we wanted to share that broadly with the community, because we really see our role as being a catalyst for these mission-driven organizations to help them tell better stories to better attract capital. And so we wanted to know what actually works. And so we surveyed organizations from 34 different countries, and really looked at what are they doing, what's working, what are the tools they are using, and there were some things that that were validating our assumptions, and some things that we were frankly surprised to find.
Right.
One of those, I think, we found 3 distinct segments, attitudinal segments. So a kind of a confident segment that really had a high alignment of internal message and the external message clarity. They were quite adaptable in their fundraising storytelling, and they also had a high degree of fundraising success. Compared to aspiring that were sort of in the middle and struggling, kind of ranked low on a lot of those factors. And one of the things that we would have expected, our assumption was that organizations that were larger and had deeper pockets would be more effective at fundraising. And what we found was that actually there was no correlation. There was no statistical significance to the size of the firm and their success in fundraising. Now, you could say, well, of course, you could argue that there's, well, if you don't have any marketing budget or anything, but small firms were just as likely to tell an effective story and to attract capital. And so what that sort of told us was it wasn't just about how much money you could put behind a story, but how well you could connect to an audience's emotional drivers.
Right.
One of the key insights we found too was some of the things that were most highly correlated with success had to do with how well did they speak to both the head and the heart. So
right.
Logic and emotion. And so, and we see this showing up in terms of how well was the business model articulated or the value proposition, and then how well did it connect on an emotional level to investors or to the audience. And this sort of this was something that we've coached companies on for over a decade, of speaking both to the head and the heart. But it was exciting to see that proved out in the research.
Well,
and I think especially in the financial industry, there's a lot more speaking to head, and there's a lot of skepticism about speaking to the heart. And I think you can also see, you can over Sarah McLaughlinize, your story, and
yeah.
it's we probably have overdone the starving children with flies in their eyes and the sad music, and there's probably a time and place for that. But if it's only like trying to pull on heartstrings, it doesn't land. We need both the logic behind, like, why should I do this, why this makes sense, and the feeling. And some of the pushback sometimes we get is like, well, this is just hard hitting. Has nothing to do with emotion. And I was like, one of the other through lines we really see is that is success really is tied to trust, and trust is not a logical equation. Trust is an emotional response, and it is fueled by, I have a logical alibi of why this makes sense, and I have a gut feeling that this is a good decision. And that can be based on a sense of greed or a sense of competition. I want to win. I mean, all of those are actually emotions too. It's not just bleeding heart, sympathy, and tear jerking stuff. So I think really understanding that, maybe for the hard hitting, like more financial sector, introducing some more emotion, and maybe on the philanthropic side or charitable side, having also some understanding and more logic can help round out some of those stories to make them more effective. We do see that along the capital spectrum, so from purely financial returns to purely impact, that the priority does switch. So it's head and then heart, and as you get into more like catalytical capital and other things, it can become heart and then head. One of the things is you've queued up here, I thought was really fascinating, was we call it the clarity decay curve. But in the confidence segment of executives, that were asked, okay, do you have a crystal clear understanding of your organization story. 74% said, yes, we do. On average, across all segments, 50% of executives said, I have a crystal clear understanding of my organization's story. But as soon as you go outside of the executive's head into their team, so internal to the organization, that cuts in half. So it drops to 24%. And as soon as you go outside of the organization, that clarity drops to 13%. And so you see this almost logarithmic decay curve that you can think, oh, this is really clear and I understand it. But does the person sitting in the cubicle next to you have that same understanding? And once you leave the building, who actually even can articulate that? That seemed to really jump out to us in terms of there's a huge room for improvement. And one of the tools I think we see in that is having your story fixed in some tangible medium. So if it's just sort of in your head or something you talk through, the room for that to be not understood and not be clear is really high. But the more that you have your story articulated, that might be in a document that's shared, might be in a short film, it might be in some way that it's crystallized and easily shared, and it's concrete in a way that doesn't, it's not the telephone game as you pass it along that it sort of degenerates. So yeah, so I think that there's a number of, this is just sort of the tip of the iceberg, and we have all of the executive summaries free to download from our site, as well as all of the research, all of the data. So it's in a Tableau statistical software embed on the site that you can go through and look at all of the responses and sort of play with the data as you will. And so our intent is to share that as broadly as possible to help more organizations attract capital through better storytelling.
That's amazing.
Excellent.
So one quick takeaway for our viewers is, at the very least, regardless of what your story is, try to document it somewhere so people can, see it and internalize it. So I think that's good advice.
Jacob, we are going to move on to our 2 closeout questions that we ask every one of our guests. And the first question is, what is something that you have learned in the last 6 months that you think might be helpful to someone who's watching today?
I mean, I recently got back from Amsterdam for the Impact Summit Europe. And, after so many Zoom meetings and with the pandemic, I think people were so hungry and eager to meet in person.
Sure.
And we had been working on this deal with Impact Bank for over a year, and being there in person, that accelerated, and I really think that just it's not anything new. We all understand that, but it just stood out to me of how much I think when it's possible, how much faster trust can be built in person, face to face, and we've somewhat missed that, for the last 2 years. Yeah.
Good point. So our second question we ask people is this: is there a challenge that you're facing where one of our viewers might be of help?
Yeah, I think on our mission to help distribute this research as far and wide as possible, if there's any other organizations that would benefit from that, if you're on a board of a trade organization or a group, or your company could benefit from it, we're happy to present, and we're just looking for more opportunities to share sort of these findings. We've just found a lot of people, especially in mission-driven organizations, tend to work in silos and sort of they know they're trying to do good and they put their nose to the grindstone and they sort of go it alone. And we've tried to aggregate those best practices and say, look, you don't have to do this alone. Let's learn from everyone and increase the caliber of storytelling so that everyone can thrive.
Excellent. Are people able to, is it okay for people to share your executive summary or share some of the statistics from your website, from the study?
Yeah, Yeah, no, it's there. It's there to be shared broadly, and we're happy to have it distributed as best as possible. So they can find that on our site, issimo.co/research. So issimo.co/research. It's all there.
Excellent.
Very good. Thank you so much. So I'm going to put up your contact information on LinkedIn, Jacob. It was so amazing having you here today. I love the video. I love the study. I was trying to put up as many nuggets of wisdom and golden quotes as I could on the
You did a
screen.
great job.
Thank you. But thank you for those of you who joined us today. But we will be showing this episode again on our website at communicate4impact.com. And feel free to reach out to Jacob on LinkedIn at Jacob Hoehne or at his website at ISSIMO.co.
And it's available on, also available on YouTube and Twitter.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much, everyone. And until we see you again next time, stay safe.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob.